Hello, and welcome to a webinar about residency in the Cayman Islands. My name is Sue Nickerson, and I am Vice President of Marketing and Sales with Dart Real Estate. I am joined today by Ben Eagleson, an associate with Boddens & Boddens, and Dan Peterson, Senior Advisor, Wealth Management with CIBC First Caribbean. As you can see on our screen, you are looking at beautiful 7 Mile Beach, one of the most famous beaches in the Caribbean, and also home to the friendliest country in the world and the easiest place in the world to do business. First, a bit about the organization that I represent. Dart Real Estate is a leading developer in the Caribbean that has invested over $1.5 billion in the Cayman Islands. Our investments have largely been focused on luxury real estate, Class A commercial office space, luxury hospitality projects, retail companies, public-private partnerships, and significant philanthropic endeavors in the local economy. Our team specializes in providing comprehensive information for individuals and businesses looking to relocate to the Cayman Islands. Today, I will be sharing information about the real estate opportunities in Cayman as part of the opportunity to acquire residency here. Ben will be sharing with you the legal requirements to earn residency, and Dan will be telling you about the financing opportunities that are available and how else you can manage your wealth here once you are a resident in the Cayman Islands. So first, for those of you who have not perhaps had the pleasure of visiting the Cayman Islands yet, and we hope we can help make that a reality in 2021, here's a little bit of information about the Cayman Islands. The Cayman Islands consists of 3 islands, Grand Cayman, Little Cayman, and Cayman Brac. It has a population of approximately 62,000 full-time residents, representing over 135 nationalities. The official language is English, and the nationality here is Caymanian. We enjoy a tropical year-round climate, and we are part of a British Overseas Territory network of islands in the Caribbean and elsewhere around the world. So what I'm going to talk to you about today are the 5 top reasons why people choose to live and work in the Cayman Islands. And those reasons are ease of access, ease of ownership, ease of living, tax neutrality, and our safe, simple, and sophisticated lifestyle. Cayman is located approximately a 70-minute flight from Miami. We have over 55 nonstop flights year-round, and in peak season, we are served by an additional increased airlift. Peak season here typically runs from the end of November through to the end of April. We have a brand new airport that opened in Cayman, and we continue to expand our airlift facilities, both for commercial and private flights. In terms of ownership, Cayman is distinguished in the Caribbean by not having any restrictions on foreign ownership of property. In addition, there are no alien landholding licenses required. We operate here a Torrens system of land registration. So for those of you who might be from Canada, Australia, or the United Kingdom, you'll be very familiar with this form of land registration. Essentially what it means is there is a statutory guarantee of title in the Cayman Islands, and on this basis, obtaining title insurance is generally not required. So for foreign owners looking to come to live here full-time, or perhaps initially buy a vacation property or an investment property, this is a very straightforward process in which to acquire property in Cayman. Cayman is also a very livable place to enjoy a high standard of living. We have excellent healthcare, including 4 hospitals and a ratio of approximately 4.5 doctors for every 1,000 residents. Mandatory health insurance is required for all full-time residents, whether you are here working full-time or you are a retiree. In addition, we also have excellent schools in Cayman offering both British and American curriculum. Children that go through the school system in Cayman typically matriculate to top boarding schools and universities in Canada, the US, or the UK. And as well, for those living here full-time, it's very easy to send your children back and forth to schools and use Cayman as your home base. In addition, we also have institutions of higher education, which is not always well known in the Caribbean. We have undergraduate schools, a medical school, veterinary college, and a law school here as well. Consumer services here are excellent, provided by both personal and professional service providers. We have a very reliable utilities network here. And in addition, we have the best telecommunication systems in the Caribbean. One of the things Cayman is best known for is tax neutrality. So there are no corporate income, property, capital gains, inheritance, or sales tax, or what you might know as VAT in Europe, or GST or HST in Canada. There is a one-time stamp tax or land transfer fee that is applied on most real estate transactions, and that is generally 7.5%. That question usually comes up when people ask about our tax neutrality is, how does government earn its income then if there are no direct taxes? And generating revenue for the government is typically derived from import duties, immigration fees, company fees, property fees, tourism fees, and your standard government fees that you would find in most jurisdictions. So Cayman, in summary, is a very safe, simple, and sophisticated jurisdiction in which to live. The country enjoys a very low crime rate and a high standard of living. It benefits from having an extensive network of professional service providers and a very efficient civil service. And it is a sophisticated place in which to live in terms of its luxury real estate, its excellent culinary offerings. We're known as the Caribbean capital of the Caribbean, and our thriving arts and culture community. Ben is going to talk to you in detail about what it takes to earn residency by investment through real estate, but essentially there are 2 options. One is investing a minimum of US $1.2 million in developed real estate, or to earn residency for lifetime, it is to invest a minimum of US $2.4 million in real estate. So our team is able to assist you with finding that property. And again, Ben will be able to talk to you about the legal requirements, and Dan to share with you the information about financing property acquisitions in the Cayman Islands. We're often asked, what is the property values like in the market? And again, that will depend largely by the year that you're looking at, the type of real estate, the neighborhood that you might be considering. But in general, a lot of first-time foreign buyers do look at condominiums in our prime real estate market, which is the 7 Mile Beach corridor. And so, as you can see on this chart, on average, prices have gone up ballpark about 4% in the last 10 years. And you can see steady growth over approximately the last 2 decades. So here's just a quick look at some of the types of real estate that are available in the Cayman Islands. This first slide here shows the residences at Seafire, which is a luxury beachfront condominium development on 7 Mile Beach. Condos here range from 1.4 million to approximately $6 million US. These are move-in ready condos with an optional rental program and optional turnkey furniture packages. The second project is a new community called Olea, which is currently under development and scheduled for occupancy to take place at the end of the first quarter of 2021. This is part of a larger modern urbanism community called Cayman Bay, which, as you can see, is located in close proximity to 7 Mile Beach. And if you're looking for something a little more splash, here's an example of a private luxury villa. This property is called Peninsula Estate. It is on the market right now for approximately $17 million US. Ben again will be able to talk to you more about setting up a business in Cayman. This is certainly another way that you can also earn residency here. And I'll defer to Ben and his expertise to tell you more information about that. The last thing just to quickly talk on is approximately 2 weeks ago now, the Cayman Islands government launched a new program called Global Citizenship. This program allows globally mobile individuals who have the ability to work from home to come reside in Cayman for up to 2 years. Applications are now available online through a government portal. We're able to share that link for anyone after the webinar that might be interested in learning more about this program. Essentially, applicants must demonstrate that they have a minimum annual income of US $100,000 for individuals or up to $180,000 for families, and show the typical things you would expect in the immigration process, including a police record check and bank references. But to emphasize again, this is an opportunity to come to Cayman, live here full-time without having to acquire property. However, we do need to emphasize again that you will not be able to work in the local economy if you're applying through this program. And the last thing is, I think it's impossible to have a webinar now without talking about the impact that COVID has had on the local economy anywhere, and that includes Cayman. We have had a great success story in Cayman in that the government has fully contained the spread of COVID within our borders. Having said that, our borders do remain closed to international visitors. So at the present time, only those who are citizens or have residency status or who are now arriving via the new Global Citizenship program are able to visit Cayman. Once you do arrive, there is a mandatory 14-day quarantine period. Our team can certainly help people find beautiful villas or condos to spend that 14-day period. And following that time, we are moving about freely in the country. So with that, what I would like to do now is turn this over to Ben Eagleson, who can tell you more about residency by investment in the Cayman Islands. Ben.
Good morning. I'm Ben Eagleson, an associate with Bodden and Bodden Attorneys at Law here in the Grand Cayman Islands, and I'm pleased to introduce this webinar, Live in Paradise, Paths to Cayman Islands Residency. So a little bit about Bodden and Bodden. We were established in 2002 and we're a boutique law firm and corporate service provider specialising in property conveyancing and development work, business incorporation and licensing, immigration work, particularly residency and relocation to the islands, corporate structuring, and estate and succession planning. Our typical clients are high net worth clients who either want to move to the islands full or part-time. We also act for a large number of local property developers and institutions. So today's agenda, what we are discussing today, the two main categories of investor permanent residency in the Cayman Islands. That is the residency certificate for persons of independent means, which I often refer to as the 25-year certificate, and permanent residency for persons of independent means. We will also briefly discuss other avenues to residency in or relocation to the Cayman Islands. So, residency certificate for person of independent means. The key points to consider for this certificate are that the applicant must invest a minimum of 1.2 million in the Cayman Islands, of which at least 610,000 must be in developed real estate in Grand Cayman. The applicant must demonstrate an annual income of approximately 140,000 per annum without the need to work in the Cayman Islands, or alternatively have an account with the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority regulated and locally licensed institution in which a minimum deposit of at least 490,000 in assets is maintained at all times. And Dan Peterson can talk to you a little bit more about that. There is no right to work and no path to naturalisation with this certificate. You must be physically present in the islands for at least 30 days a year, also with this certificate. Some additional points to consider with this certificate are that it is a 25-year certificate of residency. However, it is renewable. I think the idea behind this option was to attract wealthy retirees, although I do see a number of clients using it to come to the islands initially before they may apply for the more substantial permanent residency for persons of independent means, which I'll talk about next. So there are different thresholds for the 25-year certificate if the applicant wishes to invest in Cayman Brac or Little Cayman. I do note that it does not prevent the applicant from sitting on the board of a Cayman domiciled company which is doing business overseas, for example, an exempt company or LLC. So this certificate could be a good option for those persons wishing to reside here to administer a global business empire. The fee payable on grant of this certificate is 20,000 CI, which is around 24,000 US dollars. The key point to note here is that it's only payable upon the grant of the certificate. So if the applicant is not successful, they do not have to pay this amount. Another key point to consider is that this certificate can be, as mentioned previously, converted into the permanent residency for person of independent means. So moving along to the permanent residency for a person of independent means, key points to consider for this are that the applicant must invest a minimum of 2.4 million US dollars in developed real estate in the Cayman Islands. They must be able to support themselves and their dependents without working in the islands. Their ability, they may vary this grant in order to allow the applicant and or their spouse to work in the Cayman Islands, and that most importantly, after 5 years, they can be naturalised as a British Overseas Territory citizen and that's obtain that passport. They only need to be physically present in the islands for 1 day a year. However, moving on to some further points to consider, this grant is only limited to 250 per annum, and they can also eventually apply for Caymanian status on Ireland, which is different to the British Overseas Territory citizenship and would allow a person to have 100% ownership of a local business on Ireland and vote in local elections. Now, although the applicant must or can only reside for 1 day a year on Ireland, it's important to note that in order to get the British Overseas Territory citizenship, they can only apply for that after 5 years, and they can only apply if they've not been outside the islands for longer than 90 days in total in any 1 year, or a total of more than 540 days over the course of the last 5 years. So that is important to consider. If the applicant is wanting to eventually have British Overseas Territory citizenship and that extra passport. So some additional comments. So there are some general points that are applicable to both categories. Under both independent means categories, you can bring dependents, for example, your spouse and children under 18 years. I do note that children under 24 years can also be dependents, provided that they are enrolled in tertiary education. Tertiary education does not necessarily have to be within the islands also. The investment in developed real estate under both categories does not have to be a single dwelling or property. So more than two rental properties, although more than two rental properties will require appropriate business licensing. If any of the properties forming the declared investment are sold, they must be replaced, and appropriate notifications of the replacement provided within 180 days to the Cayman Islands government. Some other additional comments to note that are applicable to both categories is that the investment must be an equity investment in the property or properties. So a mortgage or charge will be deducted from the investment's value. The investment is based on actual price paid, not market value. And so that means if you have purchased a property and it has gone up in value, you cannot take advantage of any additional capital gains. Another important point to note is that stamp duty paid for the property or properties and any renovation and upgrade costs can be included in the calculation of the amount invested in most cases. I have had a number of clients come to the islands who have purchased rundown or derelict properties in good locations and then have spent substantial amounts of money renovating them, and that has been counted towards their application for independent means. There are some other options that we should consider as well, which I'll briefly touch upon. There is a certificate of direct investment. This is for persons who make an investment of at least 1.2 million US in an employment generating business located in the island. And the applicant wishes to exercise substantial management control of that business. The applicant must show some specific expertise, knowledge, or background. The business must have at least 30% of its staff being Caymanian, unless there are extraordinary or special circumstances, and it is a renewable 25-year certificate. The applicant must also be physically present in the islands for at least 90 days a year. Another path to residency, similar to the direct investment certificate, although the direct investment certificate and the substantial business presence certificate, which I'm about to talk to, don't really come up that often. The substantial business presence certificate is for persons who invest in or who are employed in senior management capacity with an improved category of business on the island. Now, this is mainly for financial services businesses, as you can see from the list there below: fund administration, reinsurance. Although important to point out is J in that list, which is family office for high net worth persons. So if you are looking to relocate your family office to the Cayman Islands, this could be a good certificate of residency. For some additional points to consider on the substantial business presence is that the business must have a minimum of 4 employees who are legally and ordinary resident in the islands for a minimum of 9 months in each calendar year and possess the requisite licensing. You do have to show proof of ownership or proof of employment in a senior management capacity in an approved category of business and proof of annual income. You also must be physically present in the islands for at least 90 days a year. Now, another option to consider is creating an exempt company or a special economic zone company and proceeding on a work permit basis. These options don't give permanent residency in the island, but they give residency based on the work permit. So some things to consider for this are that both are for businesses that are domiciled in the Cayman Islands, but derive their income from conducting their businesses offshore. A special economic zone company must fit into one of the 5 broad categories to qualify for a special economic zone license, which is commodities and derivatives, science and technology, media, internet, and maritime aviation. Annual work permit fees for these can be high, but generally range between 6,000 and 30,000 CI. There are disadvantages and advantages to each of these, which will depend on a client's particular circumstances. My desire to including this in this seminar is to point out that I do have a lot of clients who wish to try before they buy the Cayman Islands ideal. And so they often set up an exempt company or a special economic zone company and go on a work permit for at least their first year of residency on the island and lease a property accordingly. As noted, that gives them the opportunity to try before they buy, get a feel for the islands, and then if they do want to stay, they can always apply for either the 25-year certificate or permanent residency by independent means. Obviously, the work permit fee, if it's towards the higher end of the range, starts to get up there in terms of being equivalent to the grant fee, which the 25-year certificate is payable on the grant of the 25-year certificate. Thank you for your time today. And I'd like to hand over to Dan Peterson to talk more about the financial options.
My name is Dan Peterson. I'm a senior advisor with Private Wealth Management and Investment Advisory Services. I work for CIBC First Caribbean here in the Cayman Islands. And I'm going to be speaking to you about a number of wealth management topics here in Grand Cayman. The first point I'm going to start out with is why I believe Cayman has become the preferred address for high net worth individuals and family offices. There's a number of reasons for this, why we've been attractive. The main being that we are tax neutral as a jurisdiction. And however, beyond that, you'll find that Cayman offers the depth and diversity needed to service sophisticated wealth and succession planning structures. We have 6 banks here on island that offer private wealth management services, and the banking industry is well regulated. It adheres to high international compliance standards. I believe another key factor is that as a financial center, Cayman historically has been a very good place to find quality staff for your wealth management needs. You've got the big 4 accounting firms that are here. You have a number of decentralized treasuries who are here operating global treasury firms for their companies. You have asset management firms, and you also have independent trust companies and a number of global law firms that are also here on island. So your hunting ground to find your advisory team or say staff a family office is a good one with a deep bench of talent. I think if you take all those factors and you couple it with this is a wonderful place to live, it's a wonderful place to raise a family with a great quality of life, it becomes a very attractive proposition for high net worth individuals and families who want to move here. I'll also talk a little bit about a COVID-19 update from a financial services point of view. Banks and financial services firms here have remained open from a transactions and relationship management point of view. The banking and wealth management community is operating under our respective business continuity plans. Components of staff are in office. A lot of staff are working virtually from home. It's really important for our audience to understand and note that Cayman drives 80% of our GDP from the financial services sector. So for us, it's been business as usual, while certainly it's somewhat of a new normal that we've had to get used to. Naturally, the banks here have put mortgage debt servicing relief programs in place for the local economy. Most of those allowed up to 6 months of deferral. And like everyone now, we're going through the process of reopening and rebooting our economy at the local level. Another interesting point I've noted in the high net worth sector is that COVID is forcing the ultra high net worth community to rethink their approach to global mobility. A lot of clients are thinking about life moving forward, reflecting on the events of the last year. And consequently, as a wealth manager, I'm having a lot more discussions on how much more mobile my clients want to be in the future. And I think that's a very interesting topic that will definitely be talked about more within the wealth management community over the coming years. I'll talk a little bit just about anyone who's looking to relocate to Cayman. And again, I'll speak to this from more of a wealth management perspective. Hopefully, if anybody's looking to come to Cayman, before you approach any wealth management firm here, we want you to receive professional advice in your home jurisdiction. And that advice should be on your exit from your home jurisdiction on a legal and tax perspective. Because what we want is more of a holistic view of your situation so we can get an overall understanding of what will be your Cayman strategy once you're here. This then allows us to help implement the strategy. The planning for this can begin prior to your arrival. And we want to ensure that we're also getting you in front of the right professionals from a Cayman law perspective on both the legal and in the estate planning front. So once we've fleshed that out, we work then back through the wealth transfer process with the individual as it ties to any of the mechanics around your banking needs here on island, any custody needs, or any asset management components that you want to bring to the Cayman Islands. One real important note, on occasion when wealthy individuals are establishing residency here, they prefer to mortgage the acquisition of a property. So what type of mortgage terms are you going to be looking at? The reality is it varies by bank, but what you can expect to see is a maximum amortization of 25 years. Right now, our bank will finance 80% up to the first 3 million USD and 65% on the balance. Pricing is prime based. You could expect to see pricing at prime plus 1/4 to prime plus 1/2%. And for any of you who may not be familiar with prime rate, the prime rate currently stands at 3 1/4, so 3.25%. Some final comments. Looking at residency by investment through the lens of, say, an expat entrepreneur or a high net worth individual who wants to come to Cayman, one of the things that they will find is that Cayman is quite a receptive environment for business investment. We live in interesting times in that we have never completely stopped a global economy like we've done. And we're now attempting to reboot it. So as Cayman and the Caribbean are now entering their 8th month of dealing with COVID, you're now starting to see more real economy opportunities emerge. And that ranges from acquisition of real estate that may not have been available pre-COVID to acquisition of operating companies here in Cayman and companies throughout the Caribbean. So pre-COVID, this was becoming slightly more of a frequent conversation anyway. But now I would say it's almost a conversation happening on a daily basis right now between my clients and then any individuals who are contemplating moving to the Cayman Islands.
Thank you, Dan, for that. And Ben, thank you as well for your great presentation. So we have a couple of questions now from the delegates. And Ben, this first one is for you. How many days of physical residency are allowed or required in the Cayman Islands before an application for permanent residency is approved?
Thank you. So there's actually no requirement for any days on island before making the application for permanent residency. I'd always recommend that persons, I should say, for the certificate of for any of the certificates of direct investment, independent means, or the residency certificate for persons of independent means. There is a requirement if you're going to apply for permanent residency through work permits. But I would usually suggest that persons come on island to get a feel for the island before applying, but that's just as a practical matter.
Perfect. Thank you for that. And just as a follow-up question on that, Ben, I think your presentation covered it fairly well, but just to perhaps summarize the notes that you shared, how long does someone need to stay in the country for residency to be valid? So perhaps could you just quickly walk through again the difference between the 25-year certificate and the certificate of person of independent means in terms of those residency minimum days required?
Yeah, there is a difference between them. The 25-year certificate requires 30 days on island. The independent means larger sort of category requires you only have to be on island 1 day. But I would note that if you're going to go for a permanent residency for person of independent means, there are requirements for certain days on island in order to get naturalised and obtain that British Overseas Territories passport and eventually get Caymanian status. So although you have permanent residency and can go and come as you please to the islands, if you're looking to get the passport through that or the Caymanian status eventually, then you do need to look at that and be aware that there's minimum requirements on island.
Okay, thank you for that, Ben. Dan, we've had a couple of questions about opening bank accounts here. And one of the things you noted in your presentation is how well we've all been able to work from home and conduct business digitally during COVID. Having said that, can you talk about whether or not you can open a bank account virtually in Cayman, or if you need to be physically present? And then the second question following that is, do any of the Cayman Island banks have overseas representative offices? And if so, where? And perhaps you could speak specifically to the bank that you represent.
Sure. Well, let me tackle the first question, whether or not you have to be physically present here in Cayman. You do not need to be. However, we do like to see some form of nexus to the Cayman Islands or the Caribbean. To give you an example, I recently, last week, opened an account for an engineer of a government-sponsored entity in Saudi Arabia. That was done completely virtually. The nexus to Cayman Islands is that he will be retiring here. To give you another example, we recently opened accounts for several attorneys in Hong Kong. This was also done virtually. The nexus they had to the Caribbean is that they've set up their family trusts in the BVI as well. So the answer is you do not have to be physically present here. And we can get that done for you, but you will need to have some form of nexus here. Your intent to do a residency-by-investment type of program, or your corporate structure here, whether that be a trust, a holding company, or some other legal type of vehicle. I saw that another question here, are there any restrictions on foreign investments? There are no true restrictions. If you are a resident here or have some form of legal nexus, you're going to be okay on that front. The only restrictions that I can think of off the top of my head from either a banking or securities point of view that you need to be aware of is that obviously if you're coming from a country that is, or source of wealth is from an OFAC sanctioned country, or you're on the OFAC list in any way, shape, or form, you're going to have a difficult time getting a bank account here, but naturally you're going to have a difficult time getting that account almost anywhere else in the world as well too. All the banks here will have some form of risk classification. So if you're coming from, your source of wealth is from an industry that could be considered high risk, it doesn't mean we can't do it. It just means you may have enhanced due diligence that you may need to provide on top of that. And sorry, Sue, you kind of cut out a little bit on that second question. Could you repeat that for me, please?
Yes, Dan, we've been asked, do Cayman Island banks have overseas representative offices? And if so, where? So perhaps you can just talk about the global reach that CIBC First Caribbean has.
Yep. Yeah, most of the banks here will. Naturally, the largest banks here are all the big three Canadian banks. So we have um, my bank, CIBC, that is here. We have a presence in London and Hong Kong with the panel. Royal Bank of Canada is also here. EFG out of Switzerland is also. We also have Scotiabank here on island, and then we also have several regional retail banks that do offer private wealth management services as well too. So if we do have a truly global client, we do, all the banks here, most of the private banks here on who are the larger global banks will have the capability to get you set up with accounts in other jurisdictions as well, which would be a complement to your Cayman Islands accounts.
Terrific. Thank you, Dan. And you've cut out a little bit. So if anyone does want Dan to share more information on where banks are located globally, again, please feel free to use the chat, and Dan's contact information has been added there. Ben, we've had a question. It looks like someone might be interested in bringing a company to Cayman. So they have asked if I am looking to bring in employees from abroad with my business, do those employees also require residency permits?
Yes, they will require either work permits or some sort of other residency here. So that can either be by independent means or by the 25-year certificate. What we see is, or what I should just highlight is, if you're bringing a company or business to the islands, there is a protectionist regime that applies in the jurisdiction, so you can't actually trade locally, but you can base yourself here if your business is international. So that's quite good for international, for family offices that trade internationally, but they just can't. When I say trade locally, I mean trade on island. They would need Caymanian partners. So we see quite a lot of businesses coming to the island, which their business is located elsewhere. So.
Fantastic, thank you. And moving on to the residency by investment through real estate question. First for you, Ben, and then Dan. We've had a question on what documents and arrangements are needed for the sale of a property. So Ben, could you talk first to what the legal requirements are, the documentation that individuals typically require or need to present when they're buying property here? And then Dan, after that, because oftentimes that does require bank financing, could you talk about the documentation the banks would require here? So Ben, can we start with you, please?
Yeah, sure. For buying a property here, all that's really required, and most of these due diligence requirements will be done by your legal advisor, would be a passport and utility bill. Now, I caveat that by saying that if you're going to purchase in a company name, then that company, if it's a foreign company, will need to be registered here, or if it's a Cayman company, will obviously be domiciled here. And there may be further due diligence requirements in order to set up that company, like police clearance and professional references and whatnot. So assuming the due diligence aspect checks out, then there's not really any other requirement that you would need apart from the legal documents to close and obtain title.
Terrific, thank you. And Dan, just before we turn this over to you, on the banking side, I would like to share, as I think everyone on the call knows, I do work with a real estate team. And one thing that we find oftentimes when people are looking to buy property, they question why they need that utility bill. And that's simply so that we can verify your address in your home domicile. And that utility bill should be no more than 3 months old. So sometimes, we do have people that come to Cayman, then they go home and we ask them to send a utility bill and they question why, because they're not often accustomed to having to provide that information. So we like to share that requirement up front. Again, it's to verify your street address and the utility bill no more than 3 months old. Dan, can we talk about documentation, please, required if people are looking to finance a property? What do you need to see from the bank?
Correct. Well, outside the standard bank mandates, I kind of echo Ben's comments. If you're going to be buying a property or establishing an account in a personal name, what we're going to require is two forms of legal identification. That can be typically your passport, naturally, or a local government ID, a driver's license, voter ID card, something of that nature. They do need to be notarized. We also do require what is known as a proof of address. So that can be a utility bill or some other form of verification of your address that would have your name and physical address on any type of lending in the name of a company. What we would require is the full constitutional docs of the corporate entity. If that's a trust, we would need it we would need trustee deed certs. If that's just a simple holding company, let's say, we're going to need your certificate of incorporation, memorandum, articles of association, your shareholder registry. And we basically illuminate that structure until we get to you, the ultimate beneficial owner, or know your customer due diligence that we require on you. So that process typically can take anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks to get you vetted on and cleared. But one thing we try to do for you is we try to get you all the requirements up front so you know where you stand in regard to what you need to provide for us. The bank also is moving over to DocuSign technology. So this will enable us to close on transactions virtually, and then any form of original docs can follow in due course.
Okay, thank you, Dan. There's a question here that I'll take a stab at answering, and that is, given Cayman is a relatively small island, what is deemed to be approved real estate? And the answer is, as long as the real estate is developed and it meets the minimum investment requirement, which Ben has previously described, then that would be considered approved real estate for those looking to acquire residency through investment. I think that question comes up often because being in the Caribbean, we are part of a region where a number of citizenship by investment programs are offered. And those programs typically feature pre-approved government projects. Cayman is different. Again, we are focusing on residency by investment here as opposed to citizenship by investment. And so long as the real estate is developed, it does not need government approval for an individual looking to apply for residency to purchase property at any of those developments. Ben, we have another question here where the individual has asked, does my partner need a work permit to move in with me? And I assume by that they mean move to Cayman. So can you just talk a little bit about what is defined as a partner when it comes to getting a work permit here, and what are typically defined as dependents? So spouses, immediate family, and others, because dependents typically vary, again, depending on the jurisdiction that's offering either residency by investment or citizenship by investment programs.
Yeah, this is a good question. Dependents are usually children under 18 years, although you can get an exception if your children are in tertiary education up to 24 years. And a spouse usually has to be your married partner. If the partner is like a de facto partner, so you're not married to your spouse, then that person will either have to get independent means or have some other residency means on island, like a work permit, for instance. So oddly, I've had some situations where high net worth person wants to move to the island and they're not married to their partner, and their partner has had to apply separately, or they've had to get married. So, yeah.
Terrific. Thank you, Ben. And we have about 2 minutes left. So I guess what I would like to do, I don't see any other questions coming in from the chat. So if we could first and foremost thank BLS for hosting this today. I see we've had a great turnout. So I would like to thank all the delegates who have joined us. Our contact information is in the chat. So you are very welcome to contact Ben, Dan, or myself after the event. And if I could just turn it over first to Dan and then to Ben for closing comments. So any parting wisdom that you would like to share today with our delegates before we wish everyone a pleasant rest of their day. Dan, can we start with you?
Sure. I'll take that one first. Yeah, just some final comments, if I could add. To Ben's point on substantial business presence and how banks here can kind of help any dependents coming along on that. It's a very common question that we get if a high net worth individual is moving here, or in specific cases, we've had family offices or fund managers moving here. How can we also help their dependents? We also have numerous cases of being able to help family members that are also coming here and joining their spouses with their financial life here in the Cayman Islands. So that is definitely something worth individual family office or fund manager front. And then I would say as a final, and also make local investments. One of the things we're seeing is that we are seeing quite a bit of activity and opportunity for ultra high net worth individuals to make local investments. Some of those are, I have right now a high net worth individual who's providing an operating loan to a new financial services company. It's actually a reinsurance entity focusing on long-term care blocks. I have another high net worth individual who has structured his own fund to invest in short-term rental markets here on 7 Mile Beach, which I thought was a very interesting idea that he and his group put together. And then lastly, as an example, I have a family office that is now doing due diligence on an industrial property here in the Cayman Islands. It's a bit of a unique property, but it's something that they have a lot of experience with in North America. So I would say we're flexible, we're here to help you. And I think if you do go ahead and make the decision to look at the Cayman Islands, you're gonna find that there's a lot of opportunity here for you.
Thank you, Dan. Ben, final comments.
Yeah, my only comment would be if you're interested in moving to the island, make sure that you get a proper legal and tax advice and come down to the islands and check us out. It's a very hospitable place to live and we welcome you. We want to see you down here and answer any questions or queries that you may have.
Thank you. And I would just like to echo what Dan and Ben have said. We are all here to help you. Behind me is a beautiful picture of 7 Mile Beach. We are all very fortunate to live in a country with such a high standard of living and such a beautiful natural environment. Please do come visit us. You will be able now to visit via the Global Citizenship Program. And we do hope our world will be back to normal for all of us in 2021. So you can also come visit us as tourists. We are all here to help you with all of your relocation advice. So please don't hesitate to reach out. And you can also visit our various email addresses. And again, we can share that information. So with that, we wish you stay well, stay safe. And thank you again for your interest in the Cayman Islands.